"You're just a lowly maid," the bridesmaid sneered, her champagne glass catching the overhead lights as if mocking right along with her. Kira froze. Her hand still held the silver tray of hors d'oeuvres, fingers trembling slightly. Her eyes locked on the woman's smirking face, plump lips painted a sterile shade of rose, expensive extensions curled to perfection, and a dress that probably cost more than Kira made in 2 months. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it cut deep. 3 other bridesmaids leaned in, each exchanging a knowing look, the kind that said she doesn't belong here. Kira felt her breath catch, not out of surprise, this wasn't new, but from the sting of it happening here, now, in front of all these people, in front of him. A slow, creeping silence followed as one man, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably groomed in every sense of the word, stepped forward. His eyes locked on Kira's. "Did you just say that to her?" he asked quietly. The woman blinked, faltered, then scoffed. "Micah, don't be dramatic. She's the help. You can't possibly." But he wasn't listening anymore. Instead, he turned to Kira. He said her name, soft but sure. Then, without a word to the guests, without touching his bride, without so much as a glance at the wedding planner frantically gesturing from the aisle, Micah took Kira's hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "But I can't marry someone who treats her like she's nothing." And with that, he walked away, tuxedo crisp, jaw set, dragging a stunned silence behind him as Kira stood frozen, one hand in his and the other still holding that stupid silver tray. The bride's voice finally tore through the silence. "Wait, what are you doing?" But Micah didn't stop. And Kira? She had only one question stuck in her chest, one that wouldn't let go. How the hell did we get here? 6 months earlier, Kira Allen was running late for her 3rd job interview that week. Her breath came out in visible puffs as she jogged up the cracked steps of the Victorian-style building on the corner of Warren and 15th. A heavy wood door loomed in front of her, and she cursed softly under her breath, adjusting the too-thin blazer she'd borrowed from her cousin and knocking twice. A white woman in her early 50s opened it, brows raised, phone still pressed to her ear. She held up a finger, stepped aside to let Kira in, and continued her conversation as she walked down a long hallway, heels clicking sharply. The interior was spotless. Marble floors. High ceilings. A chandelier that didn't belong in any residential home Kira had ever cleaned. This wasn't a house, it was a statement. Kira tightened her ponytail, smoothing her blouse, trying to forget the patch she'd stitched under the collar 2 nights ago. Her stomach was hollow, her wallet thinner, and if she didn't land this one, she'd be making tough decisions by Friday. By the time the woman returned, Kira was seated on the edge of a velvet bench, knees tight together, hands folded in her lap like she was in church. "I'm Cassandra Wexler," the woman said. "You're here for the housekeeping position?" "Yes, ma'am." Cassandra sat across from her and got right to it. "We host events here. Private dinners. Social functions. My son's wedding is this fall, so there will be a lot of prep over the next few months. You'd help clean, serve, maintain order. That a problem?" "No, ma'am." "You have experience?" "Yes. I've worked in hotels. Private homes. I'm punctual, discreet, and thorough." Cassandra studied her. "You're quiet. That's good. We like quiet help." The word stuck in Kira's chest like a swallowed shard of glass. Help. Not employee. Not staff. Not even housekeeper. Still, she nodded. "You'll start tomorrow. Early. 6 a.m. sharp. Wear black." The pay was more than decent. The house was within walking distance of her grandmother's apartment, where Kira had been crashing ever since her ex left her with the lease and a pile of unpaid bills. It would do. But that first day, when Kira walked into the grand dining room with a feather duster and a prayer, she hadn't expected him. Micah Wexler. Tall, thoughtful eyes, skin a shade warmer than hers. Not just handsome, good-looking with purpose, like he knew it but didn't care. And he didn't talk down to her. When he saw her, really saw her, he looked like he'd seen a person. Not the help. Kira kept her head down, her voice polite. She said, "Sir," the way her grandmother had taught her, but Micah waved it off every time. "Don't call me that," he'd say with a smile. Just Micah. He was around more often than she expected. Helping his mom plan the wedding. Meeting caterers. Walking around the garden on long phone calls. Once, he asked her if she liked jazz, and when she said yes, he brought down an old vinyl of Coltrane from his room and let it play while she worked. She dusted slower that day, not wanting it to end. And she started to notice things. Like how his fiancée, Brielle, never said thank you. How she laughed too loud at the wrong times. How she snapped at the planner, and sighed when Micah talked too long about his non-profit work. Brielle came from money and wore it like armor. Micah didn't. That mismatch bothered Kira more than it should have. But it wasn't her business. She was there to clean. To serve. To stay invisible. That illusion held, until the rehearsal dinner. The house had been converted into a glowing, flower-drenched fantasy. The chandeliers sparkled. A live string quartet played in the foyer. Guests wore white and gold. Kira, dressed in black like always, moved silently from room to room. Until she was asked to bring drinks to the bridal party upstairs. That's when she heard the giggles first. Then the comment. "You're just a lowly maid," one of Brielle's friends said, loud enough for the others to hear. "Shouldn't you be downstairs?" The girls laughed. Not just laughed, savored it. Like this was dessert. Kira stood there, frozen. She wasn't new to this feeling, but something about the timing, the dress she was forced to wear, the music downstairs, the fact that she'd just heard Micah mention her name with a soft lilt that made her heart trip, made it hit harder. She turned to leave, eyes burning. But he had heard it too. And in that split second, everything began to unravel. And none of them, not Brielle, not Cassandra, not even Kira, could stop what was coming. The night had cracked open, and no one knew what to do with the broken pieces. Micah had walked out, dragging the stunned air of the rehearsal dinner behind him. Kira had followed because she didn't know what else to do. The tray had been left behind, small shrimp skewers scattered across the carpet like forgotten things. Now they stood outside in the cold. The porch light buzzed softly overhead. Music still drifted through the cracks in the mansion's tall windows, too beautiful, too out of place. Kira finally found her voice. "What was that?" she asked, not angry, not even afraid, just baffled. Her breath rose white in the air. Micah didn't look at her. His hands were on his hips, his suit jacket creased from the way he'd grabbed her and walked out like they were fleeing a fire. "She laughed at you," he said. And nobody says that to someone I care about." Her stomach dipped. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. Micah turned then. "Don't I?" That silenced her. The door opened behind them. Heavy footfalls. Cassandra's voice, strained and brittle. "Micah. What is going on? You embarrass Brielle in front of everyone." Micah didn't blink. She embarrassed herself. "She's your fiancée." "No. She's not." Cassandra's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flitted to Kira like she was a stain on the porch. "You're making a scene," she hissed. "No," he said. "They did." He took a step back and turned to Kira. "I need to get out of here. Come with me." Her heart thudded. "Micah. Please." The door behind them slammed. Cassandra was gone. Kira stood in the cold, arms wrapped around herself. His car keys jangled in his hand. His eyes were full of fire and something else, something that scared her more than the embarrassment, more than the crowd waiting behind the double doors. Trust. And that question from before still hung in the air like fog. How the hell did we get here? It had started with a hand towel. Kira was folding linens in the back pantry when she heard Micah arguing on the phone. Not loud, but frustrated, tight, like he was trying to keep it all in. His voice came through the cracked door. "You don't listen. You just decide. Everything is about the photos, the optics. Do you even care who I am outside of what I look like in a tux?" Kira froze, half a towel in her hands. Then silence. A long one. The kind that means someone hung up. She heard the door open a moment later, soft footsteps. Then Micah was standing just inside the laundry room, shoulders tense. "Sorry," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't mean to disturb you." "It's your house," she said. He looked at her like that answer didn't sit right. "You okay?" she asked before she could stop herself. He hesitated. "Not really." He didn't say more, and she didn't ask. She handed him the towel. That was the first real moment. After that, there were others. Brief, flickering. Nothing too much. Nothing they could name. A book left on the counter with a note, "You said you liked Baldwin." A quiet conversation in the kitchen late one night when he couldn't sleep and she was scrubbing silver. A shared laugh over a stupid playlist someone left on during a dinner party, full of trap remixes of Mozart. It wasn't flirting. Not exactly. It wasn't safe either. They both felt it creeping in, slow and careful, like a storm behind glass. You could see it, feel it pressing, but nobody wanted to call it what it was. Kira knew the rules. She had grown up with her grandmother's voice in her head, "Keep your head down. Don't draw attention. Be twice as good, and still expect half the credit." And Kira had tried. God, she had tried. She didn't wear makeup to work. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't linger when Micah was in the room. She was background. Furniture. Until she wasn't. And now, here they were. A wedding ruined. A groom with a suitcase of feelings and nowhere to put them. Micah's car was warm. Too warm. Kira sat stiffly, hands in her lap as he drove through dark, unfamiliar streets. The heater blew loudly, but neither of them touched it. "I didn't plan this," he said after a long time. "I know. I was going to go through with it. I thought, maybe I could just compartmentalize. And then? Then they opened their mouths. He didn't have to explain who they were. Kira stared out the window. You're throwing away your whole wedding. No. I'm throwing away a lie. They drove in silence. Eventually, he parked outside a small overlook on the edge of town, where the city lights blurred in the distance like a living painting. It was quiet. A little sad. She turned toward him, really looked at him. He looked tired. Relieved. Terrified. This doesn't mean anything, she said, and hated the way her voice shook. You don't get to make a scene and then pretend it means something. Micah met her eyes. It means everything. No. It means you're angry. It means I was convenient. You think I did that to protect you? His voice was low, raw. I did it because I was ashamed of what I was about to become. Kira swallowed. I don't know what you expect from me, she said finally. I don't know either, he admitted. But I don't want to lie anymore. A beat. Why did you ask me to come with you? He didn't answer right away. Because I couldn't leave you there with them, he said. And because? I needed to know if what I feel for you is real. She laughed, short and bitter. You feel something for me? You've known me for 6 months. We've barely spoken. That's not true, he said quietly. And it wasn't. Kira closed her eyes. Her whole life had been built around making herself small, quiet, safe. But somewhere along the way, this man had seen through it. Had looked past the black blouse and the silence and seen something human. And she didn't know what to do with that. Micah reached into the console and pulled out his phone. Dozens of missed calls. A message from Brielle, long, frantic. A text from his mother, come home. Fix this. He put it face down. I don't want to go back, he said. Not to that life. She looked at him, heart pounding. Then where are you going? He turned to her. I don't know. But maybe you'll help me figure it out. Outside the windshield, the city shimmered. 1,000 lights. 1,000 stories. And theirs, barely begun. But it had begun. And nothing would be the same again. They didn't go home. Micah drove for hours. Out past the city limits, past the hills that sloped like sleeping giants, until the roads narrowed and the only light came from the high beams cutting through fog. Kira didn't ask questions. She watched the dark roll by like it might answer some of the ones piling up in her chest. Finally, he pulled off into a small clearing by a lake she didn't recognize. The engine ticked in the silence as he killed the ignition. The only sound was the soft lap of water against the shore and the faint rustle of trees. You used to come here, she asked. He nodded. My dad brought me. Before he passed. She watched him for a moment, then reached into the back seat, found the emergency blanket, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her heels were killing her, and the dress uniform felt like it had been stapled to her skin. Still, she stayed. He didn't say much at first. Neither did she. It was cold, and they were both running on adrenaline and disbelief, but neither of them moved to leave. Finally, he spoke. I don't think I loved her. Kira looked at him. I thought I did. She was who I was supposed to end up with. On paper, it all made sense. Families matched. She understood the circles I had to move in. We didn't fight, but it always felt like I had to explain myself. He paused. She never made room for silence. Kira smiled a little. Most people are afraid of it. Not you. No. I grew up with a lot of it. He turned toward her, shifting in the driver's seat to face her. Tell me. Kira hesitated, but the night felt like confession. My mom left when I was 4. Dad wasn't around. My grandma raised me in a 2-bedroom in Baldwin Hills. She cleaned houses too. Told me to mind my own, keep my eyes open, and never trust a smile from someone who thinks you work for them. Micah was quiet. I did well in school, she continued. Got into UCLA. But I dropped out when my grandma got sick. Took care of her. She passed 2 years ago. I've been working ever since. He blinked. You went to UCLA? Yeah. English major. Thought I'd write books one day. Maybe teach. He gave her this look, soft, almost reverent. Why didn't you tell anyone? She raised an eyebrow. Because no one ever asks. Micah leaned back against the headrest. The cold was sharper now, but neither of them wanted to go. She wouldn't have gotten it, he said suddenly. Who? Brielle. She wouldn't have listened to that story. She would have cut you off after the 3rd sentence. Said it was sad and then asked for a refill. Kira looked down at her hands. She didn't need to listen to my story. I wasn't supposed to be a part of it. You were, though, he said. More than I ever realized. There it was again. That dangerous pull between them. A current too strong to ignore. I don't know what this is, she said. Or what you think it is. But I'm not some romantic detour from your broken engagement. I'm not here for you to figure things out on. Micah's jaw tensed. You think that little of me? I think you're confused. Maybe I am. But I'm not lying to you. She stared out at the lake, the way it caught the moonlight like silver breath. I've been invisible for so long, she said softly. And now I'm scared to be seen. Micah didn't answer right away. Then, I see you. The wind picked up. Kira shivered. Without a word, he pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled like cedar and clean soap. He didn't touch her. Didn't lean in. Just sat with her in the dark, shoulder to shoulder. And it was enough. When they finally drove back, the sky had started to turn gray. Morning pressed through the clouds like a secret trying to break free. Micah dropped her off 3 blocks from her place. Do you want me to walk you up? He asked. She shook her head. You've done enough damage for one night. He almost smiled. I'll call you, he said. You don't have my number. I'll find it. And then he was gone. Kira didn't sleep. She stripped off the black uniform, threw it in the hamper, then stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her curls were frizzed from the humidity. Her eyes looked bruised. Her lips were dry. But something in her face had changed. She didn't look tired. She looked there. Like someone who had finally said no to disappearing. Her phone buzzed. It was her manager from the Wexler estate. You're not needed anymore. Please don't return. No, thank you. No explanation. Just like that, gone. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it. That afternoon, Brielle went live on Instagram. Kira wasn't going to watch, but temptation won. The video started with the bride sitting perfectly lit in a marble bathroom, hair done, lashes thick, lips in a matte pink smear of practiced elegance. I just want to clarify some things, she said, fake emotional. Micah and I made a mutual decision to postpone the wedding. It wasn't about anyone in particular. Kira rolled her eyes. Sometimes people aren't ready, Brielle continued. And sometimes outside influences make things confusing. But I have nothing but love and respect for Micah. He's a good man. And I forgive him. Kira turned the phone off. Forgive him? He didn't cheat. He didn't lie. He saw someone being mocked and he stood up. That was the sin? And yet, Kira knew how this would play out. The headlines. The whispers. Groom leaves fiancé for the maid. Rich boy throws away wedding for staff scandal. Lowly cleaner ruins high society wedding. They would flatten her. Make her a punchline or a villain. Probably both. And Micah? He'd be fine. He was still wealthy. Still a man. Still the hero in his own story. But Kira? Kira had to decide who she wanted to be before someone else wrote it for her. That night, her phone buzzed again. A number she didn't know. Hey. It's me. You were right. I'm confused. But I meant everything I said. I'd like to see you again, if you'll let me. Kira stared at the message. Not because she didn't know how she felt. But because for the first time in a long time, she had the power to decide what came next. And she wasn't in a hurry to give it up. Kira didn't answer his message that night. She reread it more times than she'd ever admit, thumb hovering over the keyboard, brain spinning with what it would mean to reply. Saying nothing felt like control. But the silence didn't bring peace, it just stretched, taut and sharp, all through the night. By morning, she hadn't slept. Again. Her body went through the motions, coffee, toast, shower, but her mind kept returning to the lake. The look on Micah's face. The way he said, I see you. Most people said that kind of thing when they didn't mean it. They said it when they wanted something. Micah said it like it cost him something. Still, what scared her wasn't him. It was the part of herself that wanted to believe him. Later that day, Kira sat on a park bench near her grandmother's old church. She used to walk these same blocks holding Grandma Joyce's hand, listening to her hum hymns under her breath while carrying grocery bags that dug into her fingers. She felt like that little girl again now. Small. Unsure. Staring at a world too big for her hands. A soft breeze rustled the jacaranda trees. Purple petals fluttered down like confetti from a party she hadn't been invited to. Her phone buzzed again. Micah. I hope you're okay. I won't bother you again if you don't want me to. But I meant what I said. You matter to me. I'm not asking you for anything. Just letting you know. Kira stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then she typed 3 words and hit send before she could change her mind. Meet me here. He arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, looking less like the polished man from the wedding and more like someone who hadn't slept either. She didn't stand when he approached. Just slid over to make space. Micah sat beside her, quiet. The wind picked up. She tucked a curl behind her ear. Finally, she said, this isn't some fantasy for me. I know. You don't get to feel good about what happened just because you did the right thing in the end. I know. I lost my job. I've been humiliated. I'm going to be the butt of every story those people tell for the next 10 years. His jaw clenched. She turned to him, voice low but steady. Do you know what it's like to be laughed at by people who think you're invisible? He met her eyes. Yes. The way he said it made her believe him. I was 10, he said. Some family friends had a party. It was all country club types, stiff drinks and stiffer smiles. My mom left me alone in the hallway while she mingled. I heard them talking in the study. About how she was lucky to have landed a white man with money, and how I wouldn't amount to much. Kira's breath caught. He went on. That's when I realized my skin didn't make me safe. Not in that world. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, so why live in it? Because if I don't, someone else like Brielle will. Someone who uses it to chew people up and call it love. He paused. I want something real. Something that doesn't need to be filtered for Instagram. Her throat tightened. I'm not asking for forever, he added. I'm just asking if I can sit next to you for a while and not lie to either of us. Kira looked down at her lap. Then, because she needed to say it, because no one ever let her say it, she whispered, I am tired of being good. Micah tilted his head. Good. Obedient. Respectable. Quiet. I've swallowed every sharp thing to keep my place. I've been the perfect worker, the careful black girl who never causes trouble. And still, they looked at me like trash on their shoe. He didn't speak. She kept going. And now you come along and tear the whole damn thing apart. And I want to hate you for it, but I can't, because part of me, she stopped. He waited. Kira looked away. Part of me was relieved. Micah nodded slowly. Then, soft, me too. They sat there in silence again, but it wasn't the kind that hurt this time. It was the kind that healed. They started slowly. Micah invited her to coffee a few days later, just a little place tucked into the edge of Limert Park where nobody knew their names. Kira wore jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup, hair out and soft. She didn't try to impress him. He looked at her like she already had. They talked about everything but the wedding. Books. Music. Her favorite diner. His love of old vinyl. Childhood stories. Their grandmothers. How they both hated olives. There was laughter. Real laughter. The kind that slipped out unguarded. But then the other messages started coming. Anonymous DMs. Some cruel. Some curious. Did you really break up that wedding? Gold digger. Bet he leaves you too. Kira blocked them. Deleted what she could. But it wore on her. Bit by bit. Micah noticed. Talk to me. She didn't want to admit it. But the shame clung to her skin like smoke. You don't have to carry it alone, he told her. But I do, she snapped. Because when people look at you, they see a man who made a choice. When they look at me, they see a mistake. Micah flinched. Kira regretted it immediately. But she didn't take it back. Because it was true. The next week, Cassandra Wexler held a charity gala at a private art museum. Photos hit the society pages. Brielle was there, laughing on the arm of a tech investor. Her gown was green. Her smile was sharp. No mention of Micah. No mention of why the wedding had truly ended. The narrative had been scrubbed clean. Kira saw the photo while waiting for the bus. She stared at it for a long time, heart heavy with something she couldn't name. Not jealousy. Not even anger. Just disappointment. Like she'd been erased before the story was even told. That night, Micah showed up at her door holding a brown folder. What's this? She asked. Something new. Inside, a job offer. It wasn't from a Wexler company. It wasn't nepotism. It was a small nonprofit he'd invested in quietly, a literacy program for young women of color in South LA. They were looking for a coordinator. Someone who could write, teach, lead. Kira blinked. You'd be perfect, he said. But I didn't tell them that. You still have to interview. She stared at the folder, then up at him. You believe in me? She asked. He smiled, warm and steady. No. I see you. And I'm just hoping you'll let me stand beside you. She didn't cry. Not then. But something inside her finally exhaled. Maybe this wasn't the story anyone expected. But maybe it was the one worth telling. The job interview was in a low-rise building on Crenshaw, with buzzing fluorescent lights and mismatched chairs in the waiting room. Kira arrived 15 minutes early. She wore a navy blue blouse and black pants, not flashy, but clean and pressed. Her resume sat in a plastic folder on her lap, the same one she'd used back when she was applying for cleaning jobs. Except now, the title on her resume read, Community Engagement, Literacy Advocate, Candidate. Her hands were still trembling when they called her name. Inside the small office, a round woman with a no-nonsense ponytail and glasses perched halfway down her nose greeted her. Two others sat beside her, both wearing the kind of exhausted kindness that Kira recognized instantly. "So, Ms. Allen," the woman began, looking down at her papers. "You're applying for the program coordinator role. Says here you have a background in English." Kira nodded. "UCLA. Dropped out after 2 years. Family reasons. But I've been writing on my own ever since. Freelance, mostly. Got samples?" Kira slid a short portfolio across the table. Essays, poems, one op-ed she never published. The woman flipped through it. "You did this without a degree?" "Yes, ma'am." There was a pause. A long one. Kira leaned forward. "Look, I know what it says on paper. But I've worked since I was 16. Hotels. Homes. Events. I know how to manage people. I know how to stay calm when things go sideways. And I know what it feels like to be overlooked." Her voice caught, just a little. But she didn't stop. "These girls you're working with? I've been them. I know what they need because I know what I needed. A voice. A place. Somebody to tell them they're not invisible." The silence that followed didn't feel cold. It felt full. The woman with the ponytail finally nodded. "All right. We'll be in touch." 3 days later, they called. She got the job. Kira sat in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to her ear, heart hammering like a freight train. The woman on the other end had said it casually, like it wasn't a turning point. Like her entire world hadn't just shifted 1 inch closer to herself. She didn't scream. Didn't dance. She sat still, tears pricking her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Then, almost without thinking, she texted Micah. "I got it." No emoji. No exclamation points. A minute later, his response came. "I knew you would. I'm proud of you." And that meant more than anything else. That weekend, they met up for coffee again. No expectations. No talk of relationships or futures. Just 2 people sitting across from each other, finally on even ground. Micah sipped his drink, studying her. "You look lighter." "I feel like I finally stood up." He smiled. "I like that version of you." She raised an eyebrow. "The loud one?" "No. The real one." They sat in quiet for a bit, people watching through the cafe window. Then he said, "I need to tell you something." Her stomach dropped, just slightly. "Okay. I'm selling the house." Kira blinked. "Your family's house?" He nodded. "It's not home anymore. Never really was. I'm keeping the nonprofit. Moving into a smaller place in the city. Somewhere I can build a life that actually feels like mine." She didn't know what to say. So she just said, "Good." Micah leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I'm not asking you to be a part of it. Not unless you want to be. But I want you to know that whatever I'm building, I want to build it in a world where someone like you doesn't have to shrink just to be allowed in the room." Kira stared at him. No promises. No fairy tales. Just honesty. And that was enough. But the world didn't let go so easily. The story broke the next day. A gossip blog posted it with the headline, "Black Maid turned girlfriend, how a runaway groom found love below his class." The photos were grainy. One was from outside the coffee shop. The other from a week ago, her leaving her apartment with Micah a few steps behind. The article was worse than the title. Mocking. Patronizing. Full of language like unlikely couple and maid turn muse. By noon, it had been reposted on 2 major celebrity gossip pages. The comments were a firestorm. Micah left money for this? She was probably plotting the whole time. Look at her, she knew what she was doing. This is what happens when men don't think with their heads. Kira saw it all. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just shut her laptop and sat on the floor for an hour, knees pulled up to her chest, numb. Then the shame started. Not because she believed what they said. But because some part of her had expected it. That was the real wound. That even in the face of everything she'd earned, everything she'd stood up for, there was still a world full of people ready to reduce her to nothing. Micah came over that night. She didn't tell him to. He just showed up. He didn't try to fix it. Didn't offer grand speeches or revenge plans. He sat beside her on the couch, took her hand, and said, "I'll stand in front of it if you want me to." Kira looked at him, tears finally rising. "I don't need you to stand in front," she whispered. "I just need you not to run." He squeezed her hand. "I'm right here." And somehow, that was enough to breathe again. Later, she posted something herself. No clapback. No long rant. Just a photo of a notebook page with her handwriting. "You can try to humiliate me, but I've already lived through worse. I don't know anyone pretty or perfect. I'm not a footnote. I'm the story." Then she turned off her phone. And got back to work. Because now the world knew her name. And she intended to make sure they remembered it. 2 weeks passed. The internet moved on, like it always does. New drama, new names. The gossip blogs fed on fresh scandals, and the story of the Maid and the Groom became just another faded headline on a page nobody bothered to scroll down to. But Kira hadn't forgotten. Not the headlines. Not the comments. And not the way they had tried to write her as something less than human. She could still feel it under her skin, tight, lingering, like scar tissue. But the job helped. The first day at the literacy center, she'd walked into a classroom full of girls, aged 12 to 17. All black or brown. All looking at her with cautious curiosity, as if trying to figure out if she was one of them or another adult pretending to care. Kira didn't wear heels or makeup. She wore sneakers, jeans, and a faded Baldwin Hills high t-shirt. She started the session by handing out blank notebooks. Write whatever you want, she told them. Nobody's gonna grade it. Nobody's gonna read it unless you say so. This one's for you. A few of the girls looked skeptical. One rolled her eyes. But they took the notebooks. At the end of the day, one girl, a quiet 14-year-old named Tamia, lingered behind. She didn't say much. Just tapped her notebook once and mumbled, "I wrote something. First time I ever did." Kira smiled. "You want me to read it?" Tamia nodded. It was a poem. Just 6 lines. Raw. Wounded. Brilliant. Kira didn't say that out loud. She just looked the girl in the eye and said, "You're a writer." Tamia looked like she'd been handed a key to a door she didn't know existed. That was the first time Kira felt proud in weeks. Micah kept his promise. He didn't run. He texted every day, sometimes just a joke or a photo of something random, like the barista who spelled his name Micah with a heart over the I. Other times he sent links to books he thought she'd love or songs he thought sounded like her. And every Sunday, they met up for lunch. Always somewhere quiet. No press. No noise. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something deeper. Patient. Careful. Micah was letting her decide the pace. One day, she asked him why. He shrugged. "I messed up before. Rushed things. Let everyone else write the script. I'm not doing that again." She studied him. "You're different than I expected." "Good different?" She gave a small smile. "Terrifying different." He grinned. "I'll take it." But peace never lasted long. One Thursday afternoon, as Kira was leaving the center, she saw Cassandra Wexler standing by her car. Expensive coat. Hair stiff with product. Jaw tight. Kira slowed, unsure whether to speak or just walk past. Cassandra didn't give her the choice. "I'd like to talk." Kira folded her arms. "I don't work for you anymore." "No. But you're still involved with my son." Kira almost laughed. "That's a bold assumption." "You're in the press." "Again." Kira blinked. "What?" Cassandra pulled out her phone, handed it over. A tabloid article, Micah Wexler's Maid spotted at youth center, a redemption story or PR move. Photos. Blurry. But it was clearly her. The article painted her as a reformed helper, like she'd been rescued and repackaged. It praised Micah's commitment to diversity and labeled Kira inspiring, all while talking about her like she was a project he'd picked up to polish. Kira handed the phone back. "So what, you want me to disappear again?" "I want you to think about what you're doing," Cassandra said. "This isn't just about you. My family's name is still involved. You're making Micah look reckless." "Micah is reckless," Kira said calmly. "Reckless enough to walk away from a life that wasn't his. Reckless enough to tell the truth." Cassandra's face hardened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? All the attention. All the sympathy." Kira took a slow breath, then stepped closer. "You still don't see me," she said. "You see a threat. Or a stain. Or maybe just an inconvenience you didn't plan for. You think you're better than this?" Cassandra snapped. Kira tilted her head. "No. I know you think I'm less." She started to walk away, then paused and turned back. "But the difference between us?" Kira said. "I don't need your name to be somebody." And she got in her car and left Cassandra standing in the lot, coat fluttering like a paper flag in the wind. That night, she told Micah. She expected him to get angry. To threaten legal action. Maybe call his mom. But he just sighed. "I'm sorry," he said. "She doesn't know how to lose." Kira looked at him. "Are you sure you do?" He met her gaze. "I lost everything that didn't matter. That's a win." Then, for the first time since that night on the lake, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The next week, Kira held her first writing workshop. No textbooks. No lectures. Just open space. The girls read poetry. They talked about fear and voice and how hard it is to be heard when the world only wants you quiet. Then Kira told them a story. About a girl who'd been mocked in a hallway. Called, "Just a Maid." Humiliated in front of a crowd that thought they were better than her. And about the moment that girl realized she wasn't small. The class went silent. Then Tamiya raised her hand. What happened to the girl? Kira smiled. She stopped letting other people tell her story. That night, Kira walked home feeling full. Not fixed. Not finished. But whole. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Because this story? This one was hers. It was raining. Not the kind of cinematic, romantic rain you see in movies. Real rain. Heavy, cold, relentless. The kind that soaks through your shoes and turns sidewalks into shallow rivers. Kira stood outside the downtown community center where Micah had just wrapped a fundraiser. She was supposed to meet him there, something casual, just dinner and a walk, nothing loaded, but she was 20 minutes early, and the sky had broken open as she stepped off the bus. She ducked under the awning, shaking water off her coat, and pulled her phone from her pocket. 4 missed calls. 3 voicemails. All from a number she didn't know. She stared at the screen. Then let it ring again without answering. She wasn't in the mood for strangers with questions they weren't entitled to ask. Inside the glass doors, she saw him, Micah, talking to 2 older donors in suits. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie undone, his hair a little damp at the edges. He looked tired. But he also looked like someone who had chosen this version of himself, and was finally learning to carry the weight of it. He saw her and waved. Kira stepped inside. Micah's smile was real. That mattered. He wrapped her in a hug before she could protest. She smelled rain and coffee and whatever soap he always used that made her think of quiet mornings and soft things. You're soaked, he said, pulling back just enough to look at her face. I'm fine, she said. You sure? Yeah. Just, a lot lately. He nodded, and didn't push. They found a table in a back corner of the building, where the windows fogged and the heaters hummed. Micah handed her a dry hoodie from his gym bag and she pulled it on, grateful. He reached across the table and slid over a to-go cup. Hot chocolate, he said. You always this nice? He grinned. Only when I'm trying to impress a beautiful girl who already knows too much about me. She snorted and took a sip. It was perfect. For a moment, everything was still. Then she said, I think my dad tried to call me. Micah sat up straighter. I didn't pick up, she added. Didn't even know he had my number. Haven't heard from him in 8 years, maybe? 10? Micah didn't speak. I guess the gossip got around, she said, looking out the window. First it's Maid steals Groom and then suddenly I'm someone worth reconnecting with. She didn't sound bitter. Just tired. Micah reached for her hand again. This time, it was the most natural thing in the world. You don't have to answer, he said. I know. But part of me wants to. Why? Because I want to know what he wants. And also, she hesitated. Also because I want to hear myself say no. Micah didn't let go of her hand. Then say it. She smiled, just a little. Not yet. They walked home together, his jacket over her shoulders and the rain finally letting up. At her front steps, he hesitated. Can I come in? She looked at him. Her silence made his throat work. But then she opened the door and said, just for a while. Inside, it smelled like vanilla and old books. Her space was small but warm, books stacked against the walls, art hung unevenly, a chipped mug on the coffee table with dried tea at the bottom. Lived in. Real. Micah looked around like he'd stepped into a hidden room in a house he thought he knew. You right here? He asked. Kira nodded, pulling off her shoes. Every day now. Even if it's just a paragraph. He wandered to her desk, where a notebook lay open. She watched him, not nervous, but not sure what came next. You mind? He asked, gesturing. She nodded. Go ahead. He read silently, lips moving just slightly. Then he looked at her. You're so good. She laughed, embarrassed. Don't say it like it's surprising. I'm not surprised. I'm just impressed. He closed the notebook gently. You ever think about publishing? Kira shrugged. It's a dream. But I'm not sure who'd want to hear this voice. I do. That's one person. He stepped closer. Then we start there. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just full. Then he said, Kira, I. She stopped him with a look. You don't have to say anything tonight. Micah nodded. Okay. But then she walked to him, slow and steady, and rested her head against his chest. And he wrapped his arms around her like they'd always been meant to. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just there. Later, long after he'd left, she lay in bed and finally called the number back. It rang twice. Then a voice she barely remembered answered. Kira? Her throat tightened. I don't know what you want, she said. But I'm not someone you just check in on when I make the news. Kira, I'm not mad. I'm just not that girl anymore. Silence. Then he said, you sound different. I am. And she hung up. Not out of anger. But because she knew it was the right ending to a chapter, she didn't want to keep rereading. A week later, Micah met her outside her building with two things. A small potted plant. And a slim, white envelope. Kira raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "First," he said, holding out the plant, "this is for your desk. You said you wanted something green that didn't die easily." She smiled, touched the soft leaves. "It's perfect." Second, he handed her the envelope. "I submitted one of your essays. That piece about your grandma. The one you wrote last month." She froze. "Micah. Just read the letter." Inside was a note from an editor at a small but respected literary journal. They wanted to publish her piece in their fall issue. Not just publish, it would be the closing essay. "Paid." Kira stared at the words, then up at him. "You submitted it?" "I believed in it." They read it. They believed in it too. Tears welled up, hot and sharp. "Why would you do that without telling me?" "Because I didn't want you to think it only happened because of me. I wanted them to see you." She didn't speak. Just pulled him into a hug, fierce and full and trembling. He didn't let go. And neither did she. The night the essay went live, Kira sat alone in her apartment, laptop open, heart pacing like a runner waiting for the gun. She hadn't told anyone outside of Micah and her coworkers at the literacy center. No posts. No big announcements. Part of her was still afraid it would disappear if she looked too closely. But there it was, her name, bold and sharp, printed in the journal's table of contents. Kira Allen, the hands that raised me. She clicked the link. There, in clean black font against a white page, was her voice, clear, fierce, unfiltered. It wasn't about the scandal. It wasn't about Micah. It wasn't even about the Wexlers. It was about Joyce Allen. Her grandmother. Her compass. Her first home. The essay spoke of hands that cleaned floors and folded prayers into pillowcases. It spoke of Sunday mornings full of butter and gospel. It spoke of lessons whispered in kitchens, truths wrapped in silence, and the ache of being watched but never seen. It was the most honest thing she'd ever written. By the time she finished reading it, her cheeks were wet. She hadn't even noticed the tears. Micah came over an hour later, holding 2 slices of red velvet cake from her favorite bakery and a bottle of wine. "You read it yet?" he asked. She nodded, wordless. "What do you think?" She blinked at him. "I think. I don't care what anyone else thinks." He grinned and held out a fork. "Then we're celebrating." They ate on the couch, cake straight from the box, wine in chipped mugs. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. And that was enough. For a while, they just sat there. Watching the city outside her window, lights blinking like they were nodding in approval. Then Micah said, "So, have you told your mom?" Kira blinked. "She's still not in my life. Last I heard she was somewhere in Nevada." "You ever think about finding her?" Kira shrugged. "Sometimes. But not today. Today's about the people who stayed." He nodded, understanding. "Then, you're going to be big, you know. Not because of this piece. Because of what's coming." She didn't look at him. "You're the first person to say that and not make it feel like a job," she said quietly. "I'm not here to push you," he said. "I'm just here." That was it. That was the difference. At the center, things were changing too. The girls had read her essay. Tamia had brought in a copy she'd printed herself. A few of the younger ones had highlighted lines, underlined their favorite parts in pencil. Even the shy ones were buzzing with questions. "Did you write this before or after you left that rich guy's house? Is your grandma really gone? Can you teach us how to write like that?" Kira smiled at each one. "Yes. Yes. And no, I can't. But I can help you find your voice." Because that's what Joyce Allen had given her, a voice. And now Kira was learning how to pass it on. Then came the phone call. It was from a small but respected black-owned publishing house in Atlanta. They'd read her essay. They'd done their research. They wanted to talk about a possible collection, essays, stories, maybe even a memoir down the line. No promises. Just a conversation. Kira hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling. Everything she'd lost, the job, the comfort, the version of herself that stayed small, had been replaced with something harder to hold but more real. It scared her. It thrilled her. So she called Micah. "I think I'm ready," she said. "For what?" "To stop hiding." The next morning, she posted a photo on Instagram. Just one. Her, standing in front of the center's chalkboard. No makeup. Notebook in hand. One sentence written in her careful handwriting behind her. "You're just a lowly maid." The caption read. They said it like it was an insult. But it was the foundation. And I built from there. K.A. No drama. No explanations. Just truth. The post blew up. Not viral. Not scandalous. But seen. Writers shared it. Teachers reposted it. A few celebrities followed her. And beneath the comments, between the praise and the curiosity, there were the girls. The ones who had names like hers, families like hers, dreams like hers. They weren't asking for her story. They were finding their own in it. That weekend, Micah took her to the lake again. Same quiet clearing. Same steady hush of water. But everything felt different now. This time, Kira wasn't running. This time, she had something to say. "Do you think this'll last?" she asked. Micah shrugged. "I don't know. But I'm not leaving unless you ask me to." She turned to him. "I don't want a fairy tale," she said. "Good," he said. "I was never very good at those. I want something we build together. Something that takes work. Something that survives us both." Micah looked at her like she was the answer to a question he didn't know he'd been asking his whole life. "Then let's build it." And she took his hand. Not because he saved her, but because she'd finally saved herself. The morning after the lake, Kira woke up early. The sun was barely up, sliding slowly across the windowsill like it was nervous to enter the room. Her apartment was still and quiet, except for the low hum of the city waking up outside. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart beating slower than usual. Not from sadness. Not fear. But something else. Something heavier than happiness, like a deep breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding her whole life. She reached for her notebook, not even thinking, and wrote 2 words on the first line of a blank page. Chapter 1. Not an essay. Not a poem. A story. Her story. For real this time. Later that morning, she called the publisher back. They were thrilled to hear from her. They talked through early ideas, set up a virtual meeting for the following week, and promised to send over a sample contract once she had a full proposal. There were details she didn't understand, percentages, rights, timelines, but she wrote it all down like it was a language she was about to learn. When the call ended, she sat on her kitchen counter, legs crossed, toast untouched. She didn't cry. But she closed her eyes and let the moment land. Then she texted Micah. "It's happening." He responded immediately. "I never doubted it. Brunch to celebrate? My treat. No press. No drama. Just pancakes." She smiled. "Deal. You're still not picking the music. It's jazz or nothing. Then I'm bringing headphones." The brunch spot was small and quiet, tucked behind a bookstore on Pico. Nobody bothered them. The waitress smiled without recognition, which was a gift in itself. Kira wore jeans and her favorite hoodie. Micah wore a denim jacket with paint splatters on the sleeve, like he'd just left an art class. They ordered waffles and coffee and shared a fruit plate like a couple that had always known how to exist next to each other. No one stared. No one whispered. It was easy. Kira hadn't realized how badly she needed easy. Halfway through the meal, Micah reached across the table. "I have something for you." She narrowed her eyes. "If it's a ring, we're gonna have a problem." He laughed, full and free. "Not that. Not yet. Maybe never, if that's not your thing. Just this." He handed her a small, square envelope. Handmade paper. Her name written in his handwriting. Inside, a single photo. It was a black and white image of her from behind, standing in front of the chalkboard at the literacy center. Her handwriting was visible. The line about the maid. The students were blurred, silhouettes in motion, but she was centered. A caption was printed at the bottom. "The author at work." She swallowed. "Where'd you get this?" "I took it on my phone. Had it printed by a friend. I thought maybe you should start remembering yourself the way we see you." She couldn't speak. So she kissed him. Right there in the cafe. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks. It was soft. Certain. Real. But nothing stayed perfect for long. 2 days later, the center director pulled Kira aside. "There's something I need to tell you," she said gently. Kira's stomach sank. "What is it?" "We've had calls. Emails. People asking if your story is appropriate for children. If you're a distraction. If your relationship with Micah is too public." Kira crossed her arms. "I'm not dragging him into the classroom." "I know," the director said. "And we're standing by you. But I want you to be ready. Some of these folks fund our programs. We may lose some of that support." Kira sat down, the air shifting around her. "They're upset that I'm visible," she said quietly. "Yes." Kira nodded. "Then, let them pull out." The director blinked. "Are you sure?" "I'm not here to make donors comfortable," she said. "I'm here to make sure these girls know they're allowed to take up space." And in that moment, she wasn't scared anymore. She was done apologizing for being seen. That night, she got a call from her cousin Maya in D.C. "I read your piece," Maya said, voice full of pride and nerves. "It was good. Like, real good. Grandma would have flipped." Kira smiled. "She probably would have told me to change the cursing. She would have framed it and made you read it to her church ladies." They laughed. Then Maya added, "You know, I told someone at work about you today. Like, with pride. Not a trace of embarrassment. Not because of who you're with. Because of you." Kira's voice caught. "Thanks," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Maya said. "Just keep going." And she did. The girls at the center kept writing. Tamiya wrote a short story that made half the room cry. A new student came in with a poem about missing her mom and wanting to scream. Kira wrote with them. Listened. Offered her words. Her heart. She stopped trying to fix herself. She stopped making herself smaller. And when she looked in the mirror, she saw not the maid. Not the scandal. Not the mistake. But the woman who walked out of a mansion holding a tray and found her voice in the wreckage. One night, after dinner, Micah curled beside her on the couch, head on her shoulder. They were watching nothing in particular. Her laptop was open with a blank page. He whispered, "You gonna write the wedding story?" She raised an eyebrow. "You want me to?" He grinned. "I want you to burn it all down. Or turn it into a love story. Or both." She smiled. "I'm not writing it for revenge," she said. "I'm writing it for the girl who stood in that hallway and didn't shrink." And she started typing. "You're just a lowly maid." The words still stung. But now, she was the one holding the pen. Kira typed late into the night. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft clicks of her fingers moving across the keys. Outside, the city rustled, restless but distant, like it knew not to interrupt. The story flowed. Not cleanly. Not easily. But honestly. She wrote about the rehearsal dinner, the laughter that wasn't laughter, the moment her world split open like a dropped plate. She didn't sanitize it. She didn't hide her anger, or the way her hands shook when the bridesmaids laughed in her face, or how hard it was to hold on to her dignity while carrying a tray like it was a shield. She didn't write Micah as a savior. He was a man who made a choice. A big one. A scary one. But the real story wasn't about him. It was about the girl who stayed frozen in place while the world mocked her, and what it took to move. She finished the piece just after midnight. When she leaned back, the air felt different. Lighter. Like she'd made more room for herself in her own life. She didn't send it anywhere yet. She just let it sit. Because some stories deserve silence before applause. The next morning, she walked into the literacy center and was greeted by a wave of noise, laughter, running footsteps, crumpled notebook paper sailing across the room like tiny protest flags. She loved it. She loved the chaos, the truth of it. These weren't girls learning how to behave. These were girls learning how to be heard. Tamiya met her at the front, holding up a stapled packet of pages. "It's my book," she said. "Or, the start of one." Kira blinked. "You wrote a book?" "Kind of. Like, 8 pages. But it's a beginning." Kira took it and read the first line. "Once there was a girl who people talked over so long she forgot the sound of her own voice. Then one day, she screamed." Kira looked up. Tamiya's face was lit with a kind of power Kira recognized all too well. "You're a writer," Kira said. Tamiya smiled. "I know." That afternoon, a package arrived at the center. It was a first copy of the literary journal, printed and bound. Kira's name on the cover. Her words, in ink. She brought it to the girls the next day, let them pass it around like it was something sacred. And it was. At the back of the room, someone whispered, "She used to be a maid." Kira turned, calm and clear. "Still am. Just not the kind you think." Then she went back to teaching. Micah met her outside the center that evening, leaning against his car, holding 2 coffees and a folded newspaper. She took the coffee, squinted at the paper. Front page of the lifestyle section. A full spread. From housekeeper to author, Kira Allen and the power of telling your own story. She skimmed it quickly. Quotes from her piece. A respectful profile. No mention of scandal. No Micah. Just her. She looked up at him, stunned. "I didn't ask them to write this," he said. "I don't even know who tipped them off." She didn't answer. Just folded the paper and tucked it under her arm. It didn't matter how it got there. It mattered that it existed. "Wanna come with me to an event?" he asked after a pause. She raised an eyebrow. "Like, a suit and cocktail kind of event?" "Not quite," he said. "It's a local reading. I'm on the board. Small crowd. Mostly educators and authors. Low key." "Why?" "Because I want you there." She hesitated. Then nodded. "Okay. But I'm not wearing heels." "Deal." The event was held in a converted bookstore with cracked wood floors and string lights that flickered whenever someone leaned too hard on the wall. It was perfect. Micah introduced her to people carefully, never saying too much, always letting her speak first. "This is Kira Allen," he said. "She's a writer." And no one blinked. No one asked, "Oh, from where?" or "What do you really do?" They just nodded and asked what she was working on next. By the end of the night, she'd exchanged numbers with 2 editors and been invited to speak at a high school in Echo Park. Micah caught her smiling as they walked to the car. "You're different," he said. She shook her head. "I'm becoming." Later that week, she sat with her proposal open on the screen, 10 essays outlined, the beginning of a pitch letter, half a chapter ready for editing. She didn't know what would come of it. Didn't know if the publisher would say yes or if the next story would land. But for the first time, she wasn't writing for rescue. She was writing from power. Her phone buzzed. A message from her old manager at the estate. "Saw your article. Guess you were more than the help after all." Kira smiled, tapped out a reply. "I always was. You just didn't know where to look." She hit send. Then she turned back to the screen. And started typing again. Because her story wasn't finished. And this time, no one else would write it for her. The school gym smelled like floor polish and teenage dreams. Kira stood at the front of a small stage, holding a mic that buzzed slightly every time she shifted. Rows of high school students sat in folding chairs, half listening, half scrolling, backpacks slouched at their feet. She wasn't offended. She remembered what it felt like to be them, tired, skeptical, guarded. Especially when some adult came in to inspire them. She didn't want to inspire. She just wanted to tell the truth. So she started with this. "I was 27 the first time someone asked me what I wanted to be. Not what I was, not my job, or my title, or what I could do for someone else, but who I wanted to become." That got their attention. A few lifted their heads. A boy near the front stopped tapping his screen. I'd already worked in 10 houses by then. Cleaned windows while people had arguments in the next room. Carried trays while they laughed at me without bothering to lower their voices. I was invisible. She paused. But being invisible taught me something. It taught me how to watch. How to read a room. How to listen when people tell on themselves without meaning to. Now they were really watching. And that's when she told them the story. Not the fairy tale version. The real one. How she got mocked at a wedding. How someone stood up for her. How she got fired. How she found herself in the aftermath. How she started writing because it was the only thing that made her feel like she still belonged to herself. And how one day, someone told her, "You're just a lowly maid," and it turned out to be the line that opened her whole future. When she finished, the room was quiet. Not because they were bored. Because they were feeling it. Then a hand went up in the back. A girl in a hoodie, knees bouncing, voice a little too loud when she finally spoke. "How'd you stop being mad?" Kira smiled. "I didn't," she said. "I just stopped letting the anger make my decisions. I started letting it fuel them." There was a pause. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite. Afterward, the principal shook her hand, thanked her like he meant it. A few students lingered. One handed her a folded note. It read, "I didn't think people like us could do stuff like this. I'm gonna try now." She folded the paper and tucked it into her coat pocket like it was gold. That night, Micah was waiting for her at home. Yes, home. They'd started using the word 2 weeks earlier when he officially moved into a place just 10 minutes from her building. It wasn't a mansion. Just a clean, quiet apartment with windows that faced the sun and walls waiting to be filled. They spent half their nights there now. It still smelled like paint and possibility. He had candles lit and dinner from the Ethiopian place around the corner on the table. No big celebration. Just comfort. "How was it?" he asked, pouring her a drink. She slid off her shoes, unwrapped her scarf. They clapped. He grinned. Of course they did. One girl said she thought people like us couldn't do things like this. He looked up. "And what did you say?" Kira smiled, slow and certain. "I didn't say anything. She figured it out just by seeing me." They ate together. Talked about nothing. Watched old episodes of Living Single and argued over which character was most underrated. Kira insisted on Max, Micah stood by Kyle. Then, sometime past midnight, she rolled over and whispered, "Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone?" Micah turned toward her. "Always." She hesitated. "I used to be ashamed of being the help." He didn't say anything. I'd never say it out loud. But I'd walk into houses, see how they looked at me, and part of me believed it. Like I'd failed. Like I was just what they said. He reached for her hand under the blanket. "Not anymore?" Kira shook her head. "Now I know I didn't fail. I just started from a different part of the map." Micah smiled. "And look where you are now." 2 weeks later, the publisher called. It was official. Her book proposal had been accepted. A contract was on the way. They wanted 10 essays, a foreword from her, and the title she'd scrawled at the top of her notes months ago. Just a lowly maid, notes on being seen. She stood in her living room, barefoot and shaking. When she told Micah, he didn't shout or cheer. He just wrapped her in a hug and said, "I hope you know you did this on your own." And she did. That weekend, she went back to the Wexler estate. Not to work. To walk. It was up for sale now. The gates were unlocked. The garden still smelled like wealth and lavender, but it felt empty in a way that no longer made her nervous. She walked through the house alone. Stopped at the hallway where she'd first been laughed at. Where someone had said she was nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't even feel angry. She just stood there and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the people who hurt her. To the version of herself who didn't run. Then she turned and left. Outside, on the sidewalk, Micah was waiting. She walked to him without a word. He handed her a small notebook, worn leather, blank pages. "What's this?" she asked. "You filled the last one," he said. "Thought you might want to start a new chapter." She looked down at the cover. He'd written something on it in his clean, even handwriting. "You are the story." She opened to the first page. Smiled. And wrote. It rained on the day of her book launch. A soft, steady kind of rain, nothing dramatic, just the kind that soaked your sleeves before you made it from the Uber to the door. The bookstore was small and packed, rows of folding chairs pressed shoulder to shoulder between shelves lined with fiction and memoir and dusty poetry. Kira stood in the back room, breathing through it. She wore black slacks and a simple white blouse. Her curls were pinned back, soft and intentional, and her only jewelry was the thin gold chain her grandmother used to wear. She kept running her fingers across the pendant without realizing it. She could hear the crowd already, murmurs and movement, nervous laughter. They'd set out 40 chairs. 70 people showed up. Tamia and 4 of the girls from the center sat in the front row, notebooks open, pens at the ready like they were preparing for a test. Maya had flown in from DC and sat 2 rows behind them, snapping photos and blinking back tears. Micah stood by the exit, off to the side. Not hidden, not center stage. Just there, like always. When the host called her name, the crowd clapped. And Kira Allen stepped onto the stage as an author. She stood behind the podium, heart pounding, the book in her hand. The cover was matte black with white lettering. Simple. Honest. Just a lowly maid, notes on being seen. Her name beneath it, crisp and whole. She cleared her throat. "I want to start with a sentence that was never meant to honor me," she said, voice steady. She opened the book and read aloud. "You're just a lowly maid." The room went still. It was said to hurt me. To belittle me. And it worked, for a moment. But what they didn't know was that I come from women who cleaned floors so their children could write on desks. I come from stories told in kitchens. From prayers whispered under breath. From strength that never asked to be recognized. She looked up. And I turned their insult into my title. The applause came like a wave. Full. Earned. She read for 20 minutes. Took questions. One woman asked if she planned to write fiction. A young man asked if she ever thought about giving up. Someone else asked, gently, what she'd say to the girl she used to be. Kira paused before answering. I'd tell her she was never wrong for being angry. I'd tell her she wasn't overreacting. And I'd tell her, they don't get to define you unless you let them. When the event ended, she signed books. One by one, they stepped up, handed her worn copies, asked her to sign their names in the margins. One of the older women said, "You made me feel like I'm allowed to start again." A teen whispered, "My mom read it and cried. She said no one ever put her story in a book before." Micah waited until the very end. He didn't say much. Just held her hand under the table once the crowd thinned and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "You did it," he said. "No," she corrected, eyes shining. "I'm doing it." The following week, her book hit number 4 on the nonfiction list for debut authors. An op-ed she wrote for The Atlantic trended for 2 straight days. And a well-known actress optioned one of the essays for a limited series. The world had finally caught on. But Kira didn't let it own her. She still taught her writing workshop. Still walked to the corner bakery on Saturdays. Still carried a pen and a small notebook wherever she went. And every time someone asked how she got her start, she'd smile just a little and say, "Someone tried to erase me. So I wrote myself back in." Months later, while waiting backstage before a panel in Brooklyn, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Another one. She almost ignored it. But something made her swipe open the voicemail. A man's voice. Raspy. Older. "Kira. It's your father. I know I don't have the right. I read your book. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And that I'm proud. That's all. Be safe." She didn't call back. She didn't cry. She just saved the message. Not for reconciliation. Not for drama. For record. That night, after the panel, Micah met her at their hotel. He poured her a glass of wine and sat beside her on the bed, flipping through her marked-up copy of the book. "You ever think about writing a second one?" he asked. She smiled. "I already started." He looked at her, eyes warm. Title? Kira leaned back, pulled a folded page from her notebook, and handed it to him. It read, The Girl Who Stayed. Micah looked up, grinning. That one's going to be dangerous. Kira kissed his cheek. That's the point. They laughed. And in a hotel room far from the mansion where it all fell apart, far from the silence she used to live in, Kira Allen stretched into her name. She was no longer the help. No longer the side note. No longer the invisible girl in black. She was the story. And she was just getting started.